Where do you draw the line? So what is it that differentiates people who end up on one side of the distribution versus those for whom the obstacle is just insurmountable?
I think you can't draw a bright line. It's not really a perfect, we can speculate. For example, if you look at the class of dyslexics who end up as successful entrepreneurs, they obviously have certain things in common. They tend to be highly intelligent. I interviewed maybe a dozen of them. And in every case, almost every case, the successful dyslexic had one family member who always believed in them. So maybe one way of saying is, okay, so if your only obstacle is dyslexia, then it could be desirable. But if we say, so a child who grows up in a low-income neighborhood who has an average IQ, who has a troubled family life, and has dyslexia, it's not going to be desirable. You've got too many obstacles to deal with. But if we start limiting the number of obstacles, then maybe it's different. So that's one idea, that perhaps it's just the kind of sheer. Another has to do with attitude. For whatever reason, some people choose to interpret their circumstances differently. There was when I was in one of the chapters, I would interview this. It's all about a famous oncologist named Emil Freireich, who has a Dickensian childhood, and then goes on to achieve enormous things as an oncologist. And there was a moment in my conversation with him when he describes this just horrendous childhood. And so he says, so there I am, I'm 16 years old, and I'm wildly optimistic. And you realize it was a complete non sequitur, but not for him. So he was just someone who, for whatever reason, he was orphaned, grew up in poverty on the streets, he was, the whole thing is just, but he was just like, he just thought that was an occasion to look on the bright side. So where does that come from? I have no idea.
Well, and I think one of the ways that you bring that to light is to invoke this personality trait of disagreeableness, something with which I struggle, and I know you have commented is not your forte as well.
Yeah.
How does that figure into the story?
Well, it's this idea. It's a wonderful psychologist at U of T who had University of Toronto called Jordan Peterson, who I had a long conversation with about this, who sort of says if you look at the big 5 personality traits, he thinks that entrepreneurs are characterized by openness, which is obvious, creativity, conscientiousness, again obvious, diligence. But he thinks that they are disagreeable. That is to say, they are not people who require the social approval of their peers in order to. And I think he makes a very compelling argument, and I agree with that typology.
Ironically.
Theoretically, yeah. That there is something. That if you're going to do something truly innovative, you have to be someone who doesn't value social approval. You can't need social approval to go forward. Otherwise, how would you ever do the thing you're doing, right? And I give this story example in my book of Ingvar Kamprad, the founder of IKEA, one of the great entrepreneurs of the 20th century, who does, he, at a crucial point in building IKEA, in the middle of the Cold War, he starts outsourcing to Poland, which is just like an unthinkable act. In 1961, it's like it would be like outsourcing to North Korea today. You would have to have, so much audacity to do that. And you could imagine if the head of Walmart said, we're going to start sourcing from North Korea. It would just be well, that's what you'd have to be. Kamprad, who by the way is dyslexic, is just one of those people who it just doesn't bother him. He wasn't someone who, or if he lost sleep about it, he was more concerned about the health of his company than he was about his public reputation. Mm-hmm. And that, to be able to do that is not easy at all. And I think I see that trait, though, time and time again in innovators. Mm-hmm.